You are not ready for senior leadership. Those words hit me like a slap across the face. My manager Caleb Ward said it calmly, almost kindly, but the small smile playing at the corner of his lips made it worse. We were sitting in the glass meeting room just outside the strategy hall, mere minutes before the leadership planning session was scheduled to begin. I had spent 3 weeks building the market expansion presentation we were about to review. Every data point. Every projection. Every strategic recommendation. All of it had come from my desk. And now Caleb was pushing my laptop back across the table toward me. This level of strategy requires experience, he said smoothly. You are great with operations and analysis, but leadership thinking takes time to develop. My stomach twisted into a tight knot. I did the research, I said quietly. And the projections. All of them. Caleb gave a soft chuckle that made my skin crawl. Exactly. Research. Support work. That is your strength, Adrian. Across the hall, senior directors were already taking their seats around the long oak conference table. My slides were supposed to guide the entire discussion today. Instead, Caleb closed my laptop and stood up from his chair. I will present the high-level strategy, he said. You can stay and take notes. The leadership conference room was already full when we walked in together. Senior managers lined both sides of the long polished table. Laptops were open and ready. Coffee cups steamed in front of them. This meeting happened once every quarter, and it was where the biggest decisions in the company were made. Normally, people at my level did not even attend these sessions. But I had built the entire strategy proposal for the Northern Market launch, so Caleb had allowed me to sit in the back row. At least, that had been the original plan before everything changed in the hallway. Now I understood why he had really brought me along. I took a seat near the wall with a notebook in my hand while Caleb connected his laptop to the projector system. The screen flickered to life. My slides appeared on the wall. My charts. My research. My months of careful work. Except my name was completely gone from the title slide. Instead, it read in bold letters, Market Expansion Strategy, presented by Caleb Ward. My throat tightened painfully. He did not even look at me as he began speaking to the room. Our team has been exploring new growth opportunities, he said smoothly. The directors nodded with interest. I recognized every single line of the presentation. Because I had written all of them. The meeting moved slowly through the morning hours. Directors asked questions about pricing strategies, supply chain logistics, and customer demand patterns. Caleb answered each one with practiced confidence and a charming smile. But I noticed something important as the discussion continued. Whenever they asked about specific details, he paused longer than usual. His eyes would dart to the slides like he was seeing certain sections for the first time. Because those technical parts were mine entirely. For example, when the finance director asked about projected operating costs in the second quarter, Caleb glanced at the slide with obvious uncertainty. The numbers are flexible, he said vaguely. Flexible? That was not what the data showed at all. My projection model was precise down to the individual quarter. I had spent 2 weeks refining those calculations. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat but stayed quiet. Correcting him publicly would only make me look difficult and insubordinate. And Caleb knew that perfectly well. That was exactly why he felt safe presenting my work as his own creation. He thought I would never challenge him in front of leadership. The discussion continued for another 20 minutes. Then something completely unexpected happened. The conference room door opened quietly. Everyone in the room turned to look. The CEO walked in. Evelyn Carter rarely attended these quarterly meetings in person. When she did appear, every person in the room immediately paid closer attention. She moved quietly to the head of the long table and sat down in the leather chair reserved for her. Please continue, she said calmly. Caleb straightened his posture immediately and smiled. Yes, of course, Ms. Carter. He advanced to the next slide with a click. My market analysis filled the screen in colorful charts and graphs. And that was when Evelyn Carter leaned forward slightly in her chair. Her eyes stayed fixed on the screen with unusual intensity. She studied the data visualization for several long seconds. Then she asked one simple question that changed everything. Who built this model? The room went completely still. Caleb hesitated for just a moment. Then he recovered with a practiced smile. Our team worked on it together, he said carefully. It was a collaborative effort across the strategy department. That answer sounded safe and professional. But Evelyn Carter did not look convinced. She studied the slide closely again, her brow slightly furrowed. Interesting, she said slowly. She tapped the table once with her pen. Because this model predicts logistics pressure 2 quarters earlier than our current corporate forecasts. Several directors leaned forward now. They were paying much closer attention. Caleb cleared his throat nervously. Yes, we wanted to be conservative in our projections, he explained. That was not true at all. The data simply showed a different trend than the official company forecast. My analysis had revealed the discrepancy months ago. Evelyn Carter looked around the conference table thoughtfully. Then her eyes moved slowly across the room toward the back wall. And stopped directly on me. I suddenly wished I had chosen a seat further from the center of the room. You, she said gently, her voice carrying clearly. My heart jumped in my chest. Yes? What is your name? Adrian Cole. Adrian, she said, nodding slightly. Did you build this model? The question hung suspended in the air between us. I glanced quickly at Caleb. His smile had completely disappeared. His eyes held a clear warning that only I could see. I could stay quiet and protect the established order. Or I could be honest about my work. For a moment I hesitated. Then I made my decision. Yes, I said clearly. I built the model. The room shifted almost imperceptibly. Several directors turned to look at me with new interest. Caleb's jaw tightened visibly. Caleb stepped in quickly to control the situation. Adrian assisted with some of the technical analysis, he said smoothly. Under my strategic guidance and direction, of course. But the CEO raised a hand to stop him. That is fine, she said dismissively. Her attention stayed focused entirely on me. Adrian, can you explain the early logistics pressure your model predicts? My pulse was racing now. This was not supposed to happen in the plan. But I stood up from my chair anyway. It comes from shipping capacity, I said, keeping my voice steady. If demand grows at the predicted rate, our current distribution network reaches its operational limits sooner than corporate forecasts suggest. The finance director leaned closer with interest. How much sooner exactly? About 6 months. Someone at the table whistled softly. Evelyn Carter nodded slowly, a slight smile forming. That matches something my operations team mentioned to me last week. She looked back at Caleb with an expression I could not quite read. This is very good analytical work. Caleb forced another smile, though it looked tight and uncomfortable now. Yes, our department worked hard on the overall strategy. But the CEO was already looking back at me. Adrian, she said firmly. Yes? I would like to hear the rest of the analysis directly from you. The presentation continued for another 45 minutes. Under the CEO's watchful eye, I walked through the remaining sections of my strategy. The regional analysis. The competitive landscape. The implementation timeline. Every slide I had created over the past 3 months. The directors asked detailed questions throughout. And this time, I answered every single one of them clearly. Because I actually knew the answers. I had built every model, run every projection, developed every recommendation myself. When the final slide appeared on the screen, the room fell silent. Evelyn Carter nodded slowly with what looked like satisfaction. Thank you, she said simply. The meeting ended shortly after. As people gathered their laptops and papers, several directors stopped to shake my hand on their way out. "Good analysis," one of them commented. "Clear thinking," said another. When the room finally emptied, Caleb was waiting near the doorway. He looked different now. The easy confidence from this morning was gone completely. "That was unexpected," he said quietly. "I answered the questions she asked," I replied. His eyes narrowed slightly. "You also stepped into a leadership discussion," he added. "Which we had already discussed this morning." The words were a reminder. Not ready for senior leadership. The next morning felt strangely different. People in the office greeted me with subtle nods of acknowledgement. A few coworkers whispered quick congratulations as they passed my desk. Word about yesterday's meeting had clearly spread through the building overnight. I sat at my desk reviewing the usual morning emails when my phone buzzed with a notification. An internal message appeared on the screen. "Executive Office, meeting request." My heart skipped a beat. The sender was the CEO's personal assistant. The meeting was scheduled for that very afternoon at 3 o'clock. I stared at the screen for several long seconds, trying to process what this meant. Across the open floor, Caleb walked past my desk on his way to his office. He stopped when he noticed the expression on my face. "You have a meeting?" he asked casually. "Yes." "With who?" I turned the monitor slightly so he could read the message himself. His expression hardened for a brief moment before he recovered. Then he forced his usual confident smile. "Probably just a follow-up question about the presentation," he said dismissively. Maybe he believed that. But something about the formal meeting request felt much more significant. 3 minutes later, another message arrived from the executive office. "Please bring the full strategy presentation and all supporting documentation. Ms. Carter wants to review everything personally." The elevator ride to the executive floor felt longer than it had ever been. I stood alone in the polished metal box, holding my laptop against my chest while the floor numbers slowly climbed higher. Each passing floor made my heart beat a little faster. I had never been formally invited to the executive level before in my 4 years with the company. When the doors finally opened, the hallway looked quieter than the busy floors below. Thick carpet softened every footstep, and the offices were noticeably larger, with floor-to-ceiling glass walls and impressive city views. A woman with silver-streaked hair sat behind a polished reception desk near the corner office. "You must be Adrian," she said with a warm professional smile. "Yes. I am Naomi Blake, Ms. Carter's executive assistant. She will see you in just a moment." I nodded and took a seat in one of the leather chairs along the wall. Through the glass wall of the corner office, I could see the CEO standing by the window, speaking quietly into her phone. She looked calm and completely focused. The same commanding presence she had shown during yesterday's meeting. A few seconds later, she ended the call and turned toward the reception area. Naomi stood and opened the heavy office door. "Adrian is here to see you." "Thank you, Naomi. Please send him in." I walked into the corner office, feeling the quiet weight of the room settle around me. Evelyn Carter gestured toward one of the leather chairs positioned in front of her large mahogany desk. "Sit down, Adrian." I did as she asked, trying to keep my breathing steady. She folded her hands on the desk and studied me for a long moment with those sharp, assessing eyes. Then she asked a question I did not expect. "Why were you not presenting that strategy yesterday?" The question caught me completely off guard. For a moment I was not sure how to answer without sounding like I was complaining about my manager. I could blame Caleb directly. I could explain the entire frustrating situation. But something told me the CEO was not interested in office politics or personal grievances. So I kept my response simple and factual. My manager believed I was not ready to lead the presentation at that level. Evelyn Carter tilted her head slightly. "Not ready?" "That is what he told me." She tapped her pen gently on the desktop. "That is interesting," she said slowly. Because the analysis itself looked very thoroughly prepared to me. I allowed myself to relax just slightly. Thank you. She leaned back in her chair thoughtfully. Tell me something, Adrian. When you built the projection model, what was your primary concern about the expansion? I opened my laptop and pulled up the relevant slides. Shipping capacity, I said confidently. If customer demand grows at the rate my model predicts, our current distribution network becomes overloaded much sooner than expected. She nodded with evident interest. Exactly what I thought when I saw your numbers. For the next 20 minutes, she asked detailed questions about every aspect of the strategy. About regional staffing requirements. About infrastructure investment timing. About competitive risk scenarios. Each answer led naturally to another discussion point. Eventually she closed the laptop gently. You have clearly thought this through very carefully, she said. Then she smiled slightly. I am genuinely curious why someone believed you were not ready for leadership responsibilities. I did not know how to respond to that statement. But I suspected she already knew the answer. She straightened some papers on her desk. The leadership team will be reviewing expansion proposals again next week. I waited silently for what came next. She continued. And I would like you to present this strategy to them directly. My heart jumped in my chest. Me? Present to the leadership team? Yes, Adrian. You. Her tone was calm but completely firm. I want the board to hear this analysis from the person who actually built it. For a moment I could not find any words to say. The leadership board meeting she was describing included directors, senior executives, and department heads from across the entire company. It was one of the most important presentations on the corporate calendar. I will prepare everything carefully, I finally managed to say. I know you will. I left the executive office feeling like the ground had shifted completely beneath my feet. An hour later, I returned to the main office floor. Caleb was waiting near my desk with his arms crossed. Well, he asked immediately. How did it go? I set my laptop down carefully. The CEO wants me to present the expansion strategy to the leadership board next week. His expression froze for just a moment. Then he forced his familiar confident smile. That is surprising, he said slowly. I met his eyes directly. Yes, I agreed. It is. He studied my face carefully, looking for any sign of weakness or doubt. I assume you will need support preparing for that level of presentation, he added. I have everything I need. He nodded once, the smile still fixed in place. Good. But as he walked away toward his office, I noticed something different in his posture. For the first time since I had known him, Caleb Ward looked genuinely uncertain. The next few days were the most intense of my entire career. Every evening I stayed late at the office, refining every slide and practicing every talking point. I checked every number twice, then checked them again a third time. The strategy had to be crystal clear. The risks had to be presented honestly. And the proposed solutions had to be airtight. Several coworkers quietly offered their help. One senior analyst reviewed my financial projections for accuracy. Another helped me refine the logistics forecast calculations. People seemed genuinely excited about the project. More than that, they seemed curious to see what would happen next. Caleb stayed noticeably distant throughout the week. He attended the regular department meetings but rarely spoke to me directly. When he did make comments, his words were short and carefully measured. On Thursday afternoon, an email appeared in my inbox from him. Please send me the final version of the presentation before Friday morning for my review. I read the message twice. Normally, he reviewed every major presentation that came from our department. But this situation felt fundamentally different. I thought about it carefully for a moment. Then I replied politely but firmly. The CEO requested that I present the strategy directly to leadership. I will ensure she receives the final version as scheduled. 5 minutes later, Caleb walked silently past my desk. He did not say a single word. Friday morning brought another unexpected development. At 9 o'clock sharp, a message arrived from the executive office. The board meeting has been moved to Monday morning. Please be prepared to present at 10 o'clock. Monday. That meant the entire executive leadership team would be present. Investors. Directors. Department heads. Every senior decision maker in the company. I spent the entire weekend preparing in my apartment. Sunday night, I practiced the complete presentation one final time, speaking to an empty room. The slides flowed smoothly from section to section. Every number was accurate and defensible. Every risk had a clear mitigation plan. Still, I barely slept that night. Monday morning arrived faster than I expected. When I walked into the office building, the atmosphere felt electric with anticipation. Word had spread that the board would be reviewing the northern expansion strategy. Caleb arrived 10 minutes after I did. He looked at me briefly without speaking, then walked straight to the main conference hall. I followed a few minutes later. The large board room was already filling with senior executives. Directors took their positions along both sides of the long table. Senior managers found seats along the walls. I connected my laptop to the projection system with steady hands. Then the CEO walked in. Everyone stood briefly before settling back into their chairs. The room grew completely quiet as the first slide appeared on the large screen. Northern Market Expansion Strategy. My name stood clearly beneath the title in bold letters. Adrian Cole, Senior Strategist. For a brief second, I thought about the first meeting just days ago. The one where Caleb had removed my name and replaced it with his own. Then I pushed that thought away completely. This moment was more important than past grievances. I started with the market overview section. Demand trends across the northern region. Growth patterns over the past 3 years. Customer behavior analysis and predictions. The board members listened carefully to every word. Some took detailed notes on their tablets. Others leaned forward as the key numbers appeared on the screen. Then I moved to the logistics projection model. The same model that had first caught the CEO's attention. Based on current infrastructure capacity, I explained confidently, we reached shipping limits within 18 months of launch. The operations director raised an eyebrow. That soon? Yes, sir. I switched to the next slide. But if we expand warehouse capacity in 2 strategic regions, we prevent the bottleneck entirely. Murmurs of interest spread around the table. People were genuinely engaged now. The questions began coming steadily from around the table. About implementation costs. About hiring timelines. About competitive risks. This time I answered each question clearly and confidently. Not rushed. Not defensive. Just honest and thorough. Halfway through the presentation, I noticed something significant. Caleb was sitting near the back wall of the conference room. He was watching silently with an unreadable expression. And for once, he was not the person controlling the room. The final section focused on long-term strategic potential. The expansion required significant investment upfront. But the projected return was substantial. I explained how the market could grow over the next 5 years. New distribution centers. Stronger customer reach. Higher sustainable revenue. When the last slide appeared on the screen, I paused. That concludes my proposal, I said. The room stayed quiet for several seconds. Then the finance director spoke first. The projections look solid and well-researched. Another board member nodded in agreement. And the risk planning is realistic. Several people turned toward the CEO at the head of the table. Evelyn Carter sat calmly, reviewing the final slide on her tablet. Finally, she looked up with a slight smile. Thank you, Adrian. She turned to address the full board. What are your thoughts on this proposal? Discussion immediately filled the conference room. Directors debated the implementation timeline with animated energy. Some suggested moving faster on the expansion. Others preferred a more cautious phased approach. But something became clear very quickly. No one was questioning the underlying strategy itself. They were only discussing how to improve and execute it, not whether it would actually work. After 15 minutes of debate, the CEO raised her hand. The room quieted immediately. "I believe we have a strong strategic foundation here," she said firmly. Then she looked directly at me. And it came from someone who clearly understands every detail of this market. Her next statement changed everything. "I would like to formally approve the Northern Expansion proposal." Several directors nodded their support immediately. "The analysis is thorough," the finance director added. "And the risk mitigation planning is very responsible." The CEO looked around the entire table. "Any objections to moving forward?" No one spoke against it. She smiled with evident satisfaction. "Good. The proposal is approved." Then she turned back to me with an expression I had not expected. "Adrian, I have one more question for you. Would you be willing to lead the project implementation?" she asked directly. For a moment I thought I had misheard her. Lead the project? That would mean managing the entire expansion strategy across multiple departments. Operations, finance, logistics, marketing. It was a senior leadership role with significant authority. The exact level that Caleb had told me I was not ready for. "I would be honored," I said carefully. "And I am fully prepared to do the work." Evelyn Carter nodded with approval. "That is exactly what I expected to hear." She turned to address the rest of the room. "Then it is settled. Adrian will lead the implementation phase." The board meeting ended shortly after. People gathered their laptops and tablets while conversations buzzed excitedly around the room. Several directors stopped to shake my hand and offer congratulations. As the conference room slowly emptied, I noticed Caleb standing near the doorway. He was watching quietly with an expression I could not quite interpret. For a moment neither of us moved. Then he turned and walked out without saying a word. I stayed behind for a moment longer, staring at the blank presentation screen. The balance of power had completely shifted today. And I suspected Caleb knew it better than anyone. The next morning began earlier than any day I could remember. At 8 o'clock sharp, I received a message from the executive office. Strategy Implementation Meeting, 9 a.m. Conference Room A. The participant list surprised me. Operations Leadership, Finance Directors, Logistics Managers, Marketing Executives, and me at the center of it all. When I walked into the conference room, the conversation paused briefly. Most of the people gathered there had more experience than I did. Some had been with the company for over 15 years. But they greeted me with professional respect. The board decision had already spread through the entire organization. Evelyn Carter entered a few minutes later. She looked around the assembled team. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," she said. Then she gestured directly toward me. "Adrian will be leading the Northern Expansion Initiative going forward." Hearing it stated so plainly still felt surreal. "His strategy is the primary reason we approved this project," she continued. "He will coordinate all implementation activities across departments." Several managers nodded their understanding. A few made notes. The operations director leaned forward with interest. "Where do we start?" he asked. Every eye in the room turned toward me. For just a second, the old doubt tried to whisper in my mind. Not ready for leadership. But then I remembered everything I had built. The first weeks of the project moved faster than I had anticipated. Planning meetings filled my calendar from morning until evening. Operations teams analyzed potential warehouse locations across the region. Finance calculated detailed investment timelines and budget requirements. Logistics managers reviewed shipping routes and carrier contracts. My job was to connect all of these separate pieces into a coherent whole. Every department held a piece of the larger strategy. And if those pieces did not fit together perfectly, the entire plan would collapse. At first, some of the more experienced managers seemed cautious around me. Not unfriendly exactly. Just uncertain. I understood their hesitation completely. I was younger than many of them with less time at the company. But the strategy meetings gradually helped change their perception. Whenever questions came up, I answered them clearly and confidently. Whenever problems appeared, I focused immediately on finding practical solutions. Gradually, the tone in the room began to shift. People stopped seeing me as the junior analyst being given an opportunity. They started seeing me as the project leader who had earned his position. Late one afternoon, the operations director stayed after a planning session ended. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "this expansion model is one of the most organized proposals I have seen in years." "Thank you. I appreciate that." He smiled genuinely. "Most strategies look impressive on slides. Yours actually works in real life." Of course, not everything went according to plan. 2 weeks into the implementation phase, we discovered a serious problem. One of the proposed warehouse locations had unexpected zoning restrictions. That meant construction permits could be delayed for months. The logistics team was clearly frustrated by the setback. Operations suggested completely changing our distribution approach. Finance worried loudly about rising costs and timeline delays. During the emergency meeting, several voices began talking at once. For a moment the conference room felt chaotic and unfocused. Then someone asked the question everyone was thinking. "What do we do now?" All eyes turned to me again. The old doubt whispered quietly somewhere in the back of my mind. But I pushed it away firmly. "Let us look at alternatives together," I said calmly. We reviewed the regional map spread across the table. Shipping routes. Population density centers. Infrastructure connections. After 20 careful minutes of analysis, a new possibility emerged. A smaller distribution hub could replace the original warehouse location. Construction time would be significantly shorter. And the shipping routes would remain efficient. The logistics director studied the updated numbers. "This could actually work," he admitted. Operations nodded slowly. "In fact, this might even be better than the original plan." The room visibly relaxed. A potential crisis had become an unexpected opportunity. 1 month later, the expansion project reached an important milestone. The board requested a formal progress review. Another major presentation. Another strategy meeting in the executive conference room. But this time everything felt completely different. I was no longer the nervous analyst sitting in the back row. I was the person responsible for making this project succeed. The boardroom filled slowly with familiar faces. Directors took their usual seats along the table. Department leaders opened laptops and reviewed their notes. Caleb sat quietly near the far end of the room. He had attended several of the planning meetings over the past month but had rarely contributed much. Today he simply watched in silence. When the CEO entered, the room settled immediately. "Adrian," she said, "please begin." The slides showed construction progress and permit approvals. Hiring timelines that were ahead of schedule. Logistics updates that exceeded initial projections. Every section demonstrated steady measurable progress. When the final slide appeared on the screen, the finance director spoke first. "The budget performance is impressive." The logistics director added enthusiastically, "And shipping efficiency has already improved." Several board members smiled with evident satisfaction. Evelyn Carter leaned back in her chair. "This is excellent progress," she said warmly. Then she looked around the entire table. "I believe we made the right decision approving this project." After the board meeting ended, people gathered in small groups near the hallway. Conversations buzzed with positive energy about the project trajectory. Several directors stopped to shake my hand as they passed. "Strong leadership," one commented. "Very impressive progress," said another. I thanked each of them and stepped into the corridor. Caleb followed me a few minutes later. He looked different now than he had a month ago. Not angry exactly. Just quieter and more thoughtful. Adrian, he said. I turned to face him. Yes? I want to say something to you. We stood near the large window overlooking the city skyline. For a moment he seemed genuinely unsure how to begin. Finally he spoke. When you first joined the department, you were focused entirely on technical work. That is true. And I believed real leadership required much more experience. I did not interrupt. He sighed softly. I may have underestimated what you were capable of. The words sounded honest. Not forced or political. Thank you for saying that, I replied. He nodded once. This expansion project is genuinely important for the company. I know. And you are handling it very well. For the first time, the tension between us felt significantly lighter. 3 months after the board approved the expansion strategy, we reached a major milestone. The first new distribution hub opened for operations. Construction had finished ahead of schedule. The logistics team ran the first shipping tests early that morning. Trucks rolled out of the new facility before sunrise. I stood near the loading dock with several managers, watching the operation begin smoothly. The system worked exactly as the projections had predicted. Shipping routes were shorter and more efficient. Delivery times would be significantly faster for customers. The operations director smiled with genuine satisfaction. Looks like your model was right all along. I laughed softly. Looks like the team made it work. Later that afternoon, I returned to headquarters. An email from the CEO was waiting in my inbox. Please come to the executive office at 4 p.m. today. When I arrived, Evelyn Carter greeted me with her calm professional smile. I have reviewed the complete expansion results, she said. Everything is performing significantly better than we originally predicted. That is very good news. It certainly is. She studied me thoughtfully for a moment. Adrian, when we first met, you were explaining a projection model in a conference room. I remember. And someone in that room believed you were not ready for senior leadership. She paused deliberately. I strongly disagree with that assessment. Evelyn Carter handed me a folder from her desk. Inside was a formal printed document. At the top of the page were the words, Senior Strategy Director, Appointment Proposal. For a long moment I simply stared at the page in disbelief. This role will oversee all future expansion projects, she explained. Including the next 2 regional market launches. My mind raced to process what she was saying. This is a senior leadership position, I finally managed. Yes, it is. She folded her hands calmly on the desk. And you have already been doing the work successfully. I thought back to that first meeting weeks ago. Sitting silently in the back of the conference room. Taking notes while someone else presented my ideas as their own. A tremendous amount had changed since that morning. I would be honored to accept, I said. The CEO smiled warmly. I thought you might. Later that evening, I walked through the main office one final time before heading home. People were finishing their workday around me. Some waved as I passed. Others asked quick questions about project updates. The building felt different now. Not because of the new title waiting for me, but because I finally understood something important. Leadership is not decided by someone saying you are ready. It is decided by what you do when the opportunity finally appears. And sometimes, the moment that proves everything begins with someone saying you are not ready at all.